Hello friends, today we are making this video on how to develop the habit of reading in children. It is not a hidden secret that children or adults who know how to manage their time well and who are into a habit of reading success in life. Time management, I will have a separate video on how to help the children manage their time well and how to teach them to value time. Today's video is particularly about how to help children develop a habit of reading. The habit of reading needs to be inculcated or developed at a very early stage. In a number of homes that I know, parents or adults or senior siblings, they read out a bedtime story or a fairy tale to the child when the child is put in bed. That is a very, very excellent way of developing a habit of reading in children. Basically, that comfort level with the printed page is put into the child at that early stage, which is excellent by all standards. There are no two opinions about it. If that has not been done, no issues. We can always begin the day we realize that this habit has to be developed. First, we go gradually how the habit has to be developed in young children. They can be put to bedtime with a storybook. As the child grows up to read the sentences easily, we can alternate reading the lines. One line being read by the parent, the second line being read by the child, third line being read by the parent, and fourth being read by the child. Gradually, we can replace the lines with paragraphs. One para by the parent, the second paragraph by the child. This is how the child will then independently move on to reading the storybooks. You must all have read or heard about the DEAR concept, which is drop everything and read. It is a very common concept followed by a number of schools, a number of families. The entire concept is that when we follow the DEAR policy or the DEAR concept, the purpose is that the entire school from the principal to the PN drops down everything and reads. The same can be done in the family. The time period can be so fixed which is comfortable for the child, and gradually this time period can be increased. That is another way of developing reading in children. Then there is a cardinal rule on what books to be given to the children to read. Children lose interest when the book is too heavy for them or too difficult for them. They find it uninteresting, boring, difficult, and eventually give up. They lose taste for reading. So now, how does a parent select a book for a child? Whenever we give the child to read a book, the litmus test is on any given page, if there are more than 5 words which we feel that the child will not understand, then the book is of a higher level for the child. Or when on any given page we feel that the child will have to refer to a dictionary, that means that book is of a higher level for the child. It is perfectly fine for an 11-year-old child to read a book which actually should be read by a 5-year-old child. We are not testing his knowledge. We are basically helping him develop a habit of reading. When the child comes to develop a habit of reading, it's perfectly fine if that habit or that stage is achieved at the stage of 11 years or 15 years or 20 years or maybe 30 years. There is no landmark in it. So it's perfectly fine. This is how to select a book. Another suggestion that I would put here is, normally on major occasions of a child's life, we take the child to a toy shop or we take a child to a gift shop. My suggestion would be the child should be first taken to a bookshop to pick a book of his own choice. When the child makes a choice of picking a book for himself or herself, a certain amount of responsibility and accountability comes into play, and the child is somehow more attached to the book because it is his own choice, and more compelled to read it because that was the book he himself had picked. So that's another way of putting child on the journey for reading. There is another way of doing it. When the child picks a book, how do we make sure that the child actually reads it, or the child is understanding what he's reading? Maybe a paragraph, maybe a page, maybe a chapter. We can tell the child, or the parent can tell the child, okay, today during the day, you read this much, and in the evening when we meet, when we have a together time, I would want you to recite it in your own words. That greatly helps communication skills, plus the appreciation that the parent is going to give, that wow, you taught me the book. That is going to be a kick for the child, which will motivate the child to read better. I would like to mention one thing here, that it is perfectly fine if the child just flips through the pages looking just at the pictures. It is okay. If the child reads one paragraph, one page, or just opens and closes a book, the familiarity with the book has to be there. Many grown-up children start from this stage. That's perfectly fine. We do not need to panic. The ultimate age will gradually come. Another thing, we should not be deciding for the child what the child will read. Let's say we would want to have the child reading the magazine section or the children's section in the newspaper. The child wants to read the cartoons, perfectly fine. The child wants to read about the movies, absolutely okay. The child wants to read stories for young children, again good. Meaning to say thereby, the child can choose his or her own topic, his or her own speed, and whatever he wants to sit. The bottom line is the child should read. Whatever the level, whatever the speed, whatever the topic, that should not be our priority. We only want the child to read. When we adopt such measures, then we will be happy to see that because there is no pressure from outside, the child in a very comfortable way adopts reading. Now, what should the child read at what stage? In the initial years, the child can be reading books for children, age-specific, fairy tales, bedtime stories, stories that fascinate them, stories about the magical world. I will be putting a link of some books in the chat box. The child could also be reading the Panchantantras or the Jataka tales. These series help us inculcate moral values in children. Do good, be good, and good will come to you. Be kind, and kindness will come back to you. So these are the ways in which we can inculcate moral values to children. There are a whole gambit of books. I will be putting some suggestive books for very young children, giving the link in the description below. Now, as the children grow big, there are fictions, non-fictions, there are so many other pictorial books. My suggestion here would be the children should be given books about biographies, legends, how and whys, books that explore, books that ignite their imagination, books that give them open-ended situations for critical thinking. Because remember, it is not just reading that we want to inculcate in children. It is also the skills of critical thinking, the skills of imagination that we want the children to develop. In these days, there are some very popular books, like I would name a few: 7 Habits of Successful People, Pulling from Outside, Originals, Atomic Habits, Think and Grow Rich, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, Who Moved My Cheese, Making of a Manager. All these books, and there are a number of other books. I have put the link in the description box. I'm sure that all these books are popular for a very good reason, and my strong recommendation will be for these books. The next step to reading is writing the child's own journal. We will talk about it in some other video. Stay connected, stay tuned.